Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Kim Davis. Thank you for being here today. It's Tuesday, May the 17th. I cannot believe we're already halfway through May. And I am super excited about today's show. Of course, I'm always excited about every show. And this week, I'm not going to play any of the videos from Ghana because I think the internet gods were trying to keep me from telling those stories, but I am working on producing that story as a little kind of a mini doc or video, and I will share that in its entirety. But if you were watching last week and were like, what happened? Or if you watched the replay, which many of you do watch the replay, yeah, I can't even describe it. I've never in my 8 years of doing this show had that happen. Each time I try to play this video talking about the ancestral river and the ancestors, my computer just, the show locked up. Eventually the computer just shut all the way down. It really crashed. And so when I got it back up, if you saw the second part and then you saw it kind of stutter again, the same thing happened when I tried to play that video. So I'm going to let that be for right now, but I will share it with you in a different format. All right. So welcome. I hope all of you are doing well. Happy Tuesday. Have a great guest coming up in a little bit on today's show, Rebecca Harris, a really fascinating woman. I've never met her, but I've had a chance to kind of follow her work and talk to her a little bit online. And of course, my good friend and brother and colleague, AJ Jones, says that she's amazing. So that is really enough for me. But she's an author, a speaker, professional athlete doing some great things, and we're going to have her join us in just a bit. And she's got some interesting stories to talk about, including a new book that she's working on. But first, it is the NBA playoffs, and we're going to start there before we get to a little bit of Texans rookie minicamp. So we are now at the conference finals. The conference finals are set. In the West, it is the Mavericks and the Golden State Warriors. Let's talk about the Western Conference semifinals, right? Now, you guys know I've been pulling hard for the Suns. Monty Williams, Chris Paul. That was my team. Like, I was pulling for them, and it just didn't happen. After Game 7 in Phoenix on Sunday, Monty Williams, the coach, who, of course, was this year's NBA Coach of the Year, said, listen, this was the worst game we've had. And I don't think that was him being like, overstating it. They were awful from the tip. The Mavs, give the Mavs credit, the Mavs came out on fire, and Phoenix could just never get his footing. I think what's interesting is that we again have to hear, Chris Paul was up 2-0 in a series that he lost for the fifth time. And while that is true, that's the fact, but is it just Chris Paul? Did he run out of gas this year? I don't know. It was a disappointing end for the Phoenix Sun, but it was quite a move for those Dallas Mavericks. So now the Western Conference Finals will get started tomorrow night with Dallas and Golden State, and we'll see what happens. I mean, Golden State has looked great. Even when I was in Africa, the guys over there were like, no, it's going to be Golden State, and they're going to win it all. But man, the Mavericks and Luka, we'll see what happens. I think if I had to pick a team, I'd pick Golden State, but I'm hoping for a really good series. Meanwhile, on the other side, in the Eastern Conference Finals, you have the Boston Celtics taking on the matching up with the Miami Heat. The Heat have been the top seed. They advanced to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. They sent home the 76ers in the last game. I think we may have talked about it last week. I don't know if that game had been played by the time we talked about it. We were together last week. Yeah, the Sixers were just not that great. James Harden was really not very good, and he attempted only, I believe, 2 shots in the second half. And after the game, he talked about, yes, I want to come back. I'm going to opt in terms of being in Philadelphia. He says, we're trying to win a championship here. And when asked about Doc Rivers, his response was, next question. So if you've covered the league, and most times when a player says that, it's indicative of something else. But if you've covered James Harden, like I did for his entire career in Houston, that's a real sign, right? So there's some who say that it looks like it was intentional that James Harden didn't have a good outing in that game against the Heat, where the final game where it actually ended the Heat, the 76ers season, that perhaps he, when he doesn't like someone or something, he kind of shuts down. Now, I have seen that. I'm real careful about saying that a player quits, but it does look like if he checks out, it's kind of clear, because even if you go 0 for 10, you're at least taking the shots. But to not take the shots is really indicative of something else. So we'll see what happens in Philadelphia. Here's what's on the table. Doc Rivers, will they keep Doc, or will Doc become the fall guy? We know that Daryl Morey, who is the general manager, did not hire Doc Rivers. So he wasn't Doc's guy. I mean, Doc's not his guy necessarily. We know that James Harden is Daryl's guy. Okay, so while this is, James Harden has an option, this is a player option. He said, I'm going to opt in. There's a conversation about a max deal on the table. I'd like to hear from you. Would you, and you can drop it in the comments in the chat, would you give James Harden a max deal? Would you pay him $276 million after what you've seen? I'm just curious, and I'll leave it there. So that's kind of my little NBA update. We'll talk more about the NBA with and the playoffs with Rebecca. I'll get her picks about who she expects to see in the finals and maybe ultimately win. One of the things that's happening that is of note for Rockets fans is that tonight is the lottery, right? The NBA lottery is tonight. The Rockets will find out if they get the top overall pick in the draft, or exactly where they will pick in the first round of the upcoming draft. The team struggled, finishing at the bottom again this past season. They're young, have a lot of talent, a lot of upside, and we'll see if they will get the top pick in the draft. Last year they had the number 2 pick. With that, they selected the rookie Jalen Green, and he had I would say by all accounts, he had a very successful rookie season. His future looks bright, as does the Rockets. So we'll see what happens with the lottery selection tonight. Where will these Houston Rockets pick in the upcoming draft? And of course, it's getting close to time for camp, right? Where it's summer, right? It's 1,000 degrees here in Texas, in Houston. Feels like it. The Texans held their rookie mini camp last week, where the rookies got to come in and be introduced to, as head coach Lovie Smith says, how they do things here in the NFL, not just in the NFL, but with the Houston Texans. I'll let you hear from Lovie Smith. This is what he said about the rookies and really the expectations of what they were looking for before they even start going into OTAs with the veterans, and then of course mandatory mini camp, the break before things really heat up with training camp and on to the season. Here is Texans head coach Lovie Smith.
Should start the conversation like that. For rookie mini camp, on what we're trying to get accomplished, we have a few guys that are in on a tryout basis. In the past, I've had players that didn't have a contract, that came in on this tryout weekend, that end up starting for us at both of my last stops. So that part is important. And then for the guys that we have signed up, whether through the draft or undrafted players, it's about starting the process. We will integrate them in with the rest of our veterans Monday. So it's really about catching them up as much as anything. We've seen them work out. We have a pretty good idea of who they are. Rookies are never in the type of shape that they think they're in. But, down here you start the process. So it was good to get out on the football field, see them in a Houston Texans uniform.
So that was head coach Lovie Smith talking about kind of the goal and the plan for what they're looking for from these rookies. And then the other thing, when we were out at mini camp on Friday, you always know there's a new coach by the music. And so Lovie graced us with some Motown favorites, and he was asked about it. He talked about it in the press conference, really, about his selection of music and how the players responded to it, and really what made him start with the music he did. So this is Lovie Smith talking about his musical playlist for last week's first day of rookie camp.
Well, for a couple of reasons. I wake up every day to music. I'm a music guy, to say the least. You can tell probably a little bit more towards Motown than rap music. That's probably easy to see, but you kind of start practice off the same way. It's about everywhere I've been. Thursdays, Keep On Pushing about Impressions. The lead singer, Curtis Mayfield. That's where we start things off a little bit. And it's culture, a little bit too. We don't want R&B music to lead completely. So you're right, that's an important question right there. But you get me started on music, I can talk a while. No, seriously, music has become a big part of practices nowadays for young people. If you go in our locker rooms, and there's nothing wrong with it, there's a time for it. The game isn't played in silence. So I like music at practice, and at certain times, loud music at practice. Yes.
Listen, he doesn't want people to forget about Motown. I can appreciate that, and it was cool being out at practice last week. So that was Lovie Smith talking about the music, and how music is just such a big part of his life. He likes music, and so I'll be interested to hear the different playlists as we go through the summer and camps and head on into the fall for the season. OTA start next week. They may start this week, but we have our first availability next week to be able to go over and watch practice and talk to some of the veterans and rookies after they actually get a chance to do a little work. Because last week what we saw was a lot of stretching and some conditioning and that sort of thing. We didn't really see any balls being thrown, but there was no expectation of that because it was just kind of the introduction, as Lovie said, to not just the NFL, but to the Houston Texans way of doing things. So there was a scary moment last night for the Houston Astros. They're playing in Boston. They ultimately lost that game to the Red Sox. But the bigger story was that pitcher Jake Odorizzi was on the mound. Play unfolded. He took a couple steps off the mound and just collapsed. It was scary because nobody knew what it was. He was clearly in a lot of pain. And he collapsed on the infield grass. He was eventually helped up onto a stretcher and wheeled off the field. So we're waiting to hear any updates about Odorizzi's condition. But that was scary. It was scary watching it. I can only imagine what it must have felt like for him. We didn't know of any. We hadn't heard of any injuries or issues with Jake Odorizzi. So not sure what that was, and wishing the best for him. Look forward to an update, and when we get that update, I'll make sure that I share it with you. So, hey, good morning, Charles Darden. It's always good. Our legal expert. We've got to get you back on soon to talk about some things, because we know that the NFL is going to be meeting with Deshaun Watson in town this week, and I'd love to get your legal perspective on when we know the outcome of those meetings and those interviews of what happens. And Charles also says Doc is a great coach. That Sixers team is poorly put together, and no, he wouldn't give Harden a max offer. I understand, my friend. All right, I'm excited to welcome now to the show for the very first time, and I say first time because I'm already predicting that she's going to come back, but Rebecca Harris. And I really kind of met her, if you will, online with Twitter. And as I said, when AJ said, oh yeah, that she dropped a nugget about a story, and I thought I'd love to talk about it, and he said, you know what, she'd be a great guest. So I appreciate her answering the call on such short notice. Rebecca, good morning. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you for reaching out, and I'm excited to be here.
And you respond. I was like, great, she can do it this week. It was awesome. I'm like, you know what? I can talk about camp. We're going to have NFL camps all summer. Let's give the audience something else kind of interesting. So first of all, tell us what you're up to now. I know that you are a graduate of U of I. I actually covered U of I for a bit. When were you at University of Illinois?
I graduated there 2008.
Okay, so I was there before you went. So I worked at a TV station in Springfield, Champaign, Decatur market. So I spent quite a bit of time in your former stomping grounds. What are you up to these days? I know that you've written a book and you're working on another book.
Yeah. So these days, I'm working out, I train, but I also worked for an AAU circuit, USJN. Like you mentioned, I'm an author working on another book and just preparing for another season that'll come probably August, September. And that's the life of a professional athlete, to be honest.
Right. So you played your most of your professional career overseas, or all of it overseas?
Yes, most of it overseas. I think I've played in 7 different countries. I've played EuroLeague. Most recently, I played in the inaugural season for Athletes Unlimited, where we mixed it up with some professional athletes that only play WNBA, some of us that play overseas at a high level, and then only a few that were just, I think, 1 or 2 years removed from college. So that was a good time.
So I've had a chance to cover the WNBA. In fact, I was a part of the Comets radio broadcast team for a couple of seasons. I've always found it fascinating, the life of professional basketball players, especially overseas. And we've heard, for some people who haven't covered much of women's basketball, they got introduced a little bit more to the whole overseas experience with the Brittney Griner story. Talk a little bit about what it's like working overseas for most of your career and what that experience is like.
I mean, honestly, it is a completely different ball game. Whatever you think, you have no idea unless you've really been into it. I pride myself on the level of my success coming because I was a military brat. So I actually grew up mostly overseas anyways. So for me to go into a different culture wasn't an issue. To be engulfed in a different area, having people around me that didn't speak English or it's broken English. But it is very different. And the game is slightly different as well. There are some rules that are different. The way that they call travels in Europe is different than the way that we call travels here in America. And I've actually seen quite a few players early in their career be so frustrated with that rule alone, and they feel like they can't adapt and play their game that it kind of disrupts their career before it even gets started. But honestly, if you do not have an open mind, if you are not willing to adapt to the world around you, as well as kind of learn the game a little differently, you are not going to survive. Not only that, people get homesick really quickly. And that's because they have an expectation of what it's supposed to be like when they're overseas. Like, no, I just left college and I played at Baylor University and we had this, and the training room was supposed to be like this. And you're not at home. You are not at Baylor. It is very different. And depending on the country that you go to and your introduction to professional sports over there, you may not even start at the highest level in clubs. So you might be starting from the ground up, and sometimes you have to work your way up. And so you might be, I don't want to necessarily say a third world country with third world products and gym stuff, but that is a possibility.
What has been your favorite place to play, league, country? Where have you liked it, enjoyed it the most?
I have 2 answers for this.
Okay.
One is Poland. I spent the most time in Poland, I think 5 seasons. And what I loved about Poland is the time frame of when I first played there to the last time I played there. I mean, the league and the country itself had grown so much. And the way that you can tell how good a league is the amount of WNBA players and Olympians that come through there. They are what makes the league known to be great. That's where the highest level of competition is. So the Polish league had grown quite a bit during my time there. The first year that I played there, I think, was 2011, either 2010 or 2011. And the last time I played there was 2018. And in that 6-7 year span, I mean, I just saw so much growth. For example, my first year there, it was hard to find like internet outside of your house. We were using the plug-in cable. Didn't have Wi-Fi at home. It was plug-in cable into your laptop. But 2018, Wi-Fi everywhere. And then English-speaking people everywhere at this point, too. They're learning more and more English over there to communicate. so that would be my first answer because I spent the most time there. But then my next, Turkey. Really enjoyed Turkey. A lot of competition there in Turkey for sure. Matter of fact, shout out to Fenerbahce. They just won the championship, and a couple of WNBA players on that team, Amanda Zowie, Kia Stokes, Sabali, who won the MVP. But Turkey, great league. I like the area. Cheap when it comes to the American dollar. So yeah.
So, have you? Would you like to play in the WNBA, or is the overseas life what works best for you?
Earlier in my career, I think that was a big goal of mine. If we're gonna get into it, the WNBA just now, in my opinion, and several other people's opinion, is just now starting to open up their range in how they recruit and pay attention to all of the athletes that play college women's basketball. For so long it would really only be if your team was talked about 24/7. If your team made it to the Final Four, then it was like clockwork. Okay, we're paying attention. WNBA, it's on the radar. But as we all know, there's not enough spots. We're trying to expand rosters, and we're talking about expansion of teams, which is the conversation that we've been having forever. And I just think, I'm on the end of my career. Maybe I have 2-3 more years, or I'm not going to put a timeline on it. But that's no longer my focus. Of I'm trying to make the WNBA. That's not. I've really had a great time playing overseas. I enjoy it because I love to travel. I love to use my passport. I love to be engulfed in other cultures. It's a whole different vibe for me. It's part of my lifestyle just from the time that I was a kid anyways of being overseas. So, I'm fine with it. Other people aren't fine with it, and I completely understand. Now, if the came calling one day, I'd be like, okay, sure, let's training camp, let's try out all of that, and I'd go through the process, and I understand what the process is like, and I'd be fine with it. But it's not something that I'm, breaking my back over at this point.
So, talking with Rebecca Harris, and we're talking about the life of a professional basketball player, especially the differences in the WNBA and in playing overseas. So, are you surprised that financially there are more opportunities to play, to do better overseas for most people than there are here at the WNBA? That the WNBA hasn't elevated their level of salaries yet.
I mean, well, they just elevated their salaries over the last 2 years, due to renegotiating the CBA. However, I'm not surprised. Why? Because I've known the business for a long time, and I understand that there's just more money overseas for us as a whole, and that's why you have so many WNBA players play in the WNBA for 3-4 months and then go overseas to make their real money. Now it's crazy that is the logic behind it and how it's flipped. And, the WNBA is supposed to be the best league in the world, and it is. However, I know plenty of top Europeans that will never touch the WNBA because they look at it like, why would I play in EuroLeague and play and, we are practicing hard and I play for my national team, and then for the summer, why would I leave Europe to go to the WNBA and play for much less money when I can just have a vacation and rest my body? But for Americans, it's got to be kind of flipped when they have that opportunity, just because they are the face of the league. It matters that they represent here at home and then go there. So there's so many things that need to be changed and talked about, and it's a continued conversation.
So, of course, I have to ask you your thoughts about what's happening with Brittney Griner. I think it's important that we keep having the conversation and not to let it slide. Were you surprised that she was detained, and your thoughts about how that whole thing happened? And does that give you pause and concern about your travels when you're playing overseas?
Surprised? Nothing surprises me, I guess. and just simply because Russia doesn't play by anybody else's rules. It's unfortunate what is going on with Brittney right now. Obviously, I think that most of us thought that she would be home in a matter of a short amount of time, within a week of us even hearing things, right? But, I hate it. I'm actually more surprised that they didn't keep everyone, like her teammates. I'm surprised by that. Trying not to mix my words here, but she plays on a team that had 3 or 4 other Americans, and 3 of them were blonde, blue-eyed, white girls. And it's almost like, why wouldn't you take all of them? Or you know what I mean? But I don't want to get caught up in the why her versus them. I'd rather them not take any of them. But my prayers are with Brittney on a regular basis. It hurts my heart. I think about it every day, all the time. I have played in Russia during EuroLeague play, so I have crossed the border of Russia and been there. And it's just, I can't imagine what she's going through because, we don't know. And I pray that when she finally does get back home, that she has the support that she needs, because she is literally a prisoner of war. And she's being used as a pawn. I don't know, did you see the video of what they were saying? At first they were saying, like, the dog sniffed her out, but that wasn't the case at all. She was going through security like a normal human being. And then they even had dogs going through. The dogs didn't detect anything. Yeah. And then they bring the dogs over. I mean, almost just for logistics purposes, to show, like, dogs are here near her. But it's crazy, and I hope that she can get home sooner rather than later. It's already been 80-something days. I'm looking at Joe, President Biden, what are you doing? Because we all know that if she was somebody else, people have mentioned Tom Brady. If she was somebody else, it would have been a done deal already. I'm like, send in the cavalry. Where's Jack Bauer, 24? Go rescue her, honestly.
Right. Well, I'm with you. Our prayers are with Brittney and her family, and hopefully that, sooner than later that can end, because that's got to be quite an experience for her. So we wish her nothing but the best. All right, I want to talk about your book. How bad do you want it? All right, tell me about the book. There it is. She's got a copy of it. And what made you write it? And when we read it, what will we find out?
So I wrote this book on a regular basis. I receive questions, comments, DMs from whether it be AU coaches, high school coaches, some small college coaches, but especially like parents and student athletes, asking me about my points of view from a professional athlete, but also from my time as coaching, because I've also been a head coach for college and high school. And I would answer these questions without a second thought. And one time, this was about, I think it was 2 years ago, right before the pandemic hit, I was on a road trip. It was like the longest road trip ever, 6 hours, 7 hours, on the back of a bus in Germany. And I received a DM off of Twitter from a young lady just asking me, hey, what do I need to do to reach my next level? She was actually playing JUCO at the time and was about to transfer. And she was just looking like, how can she pick up her recruitment? How can she reach out to coaches? And I answered her specific question, but then I started writing down all of the questions that I normally receive. And I had like 150 questions, whether it was talking about AAU, how to communicate with your current coaches, how to get better acquainted with your teammates, how to, overcome some adversity and to push through to their next level. And next thing you know, I just started writing this book and having these chapters. And at the end of just every question that anybody would ask me, and it would be as simple as, well, how bad do you want it? Because you have to be willing to do some things that maybe everyone else isn't doing. If you're not being recruited at all, well, what else are you doing? Are you just sitting back and waiting, or are you reaching out and taking that first step and taking some initiative? Because coaches really love that. When they check a DM, when they see that somebody's trying to text them, found their email, hits them up on Instagram to ask questions and showcase some of their skills. And it takes you being persistent at times. If you want it bad enough, we can make it happen. But it's more than just trying to reach your next level within athletics. This is all about life, networking, no matter what it is you want to be. Like, are you willing to come out of self and do some things that you wouldn't normally do in order to reach your goals? Or is this just a casual thought? Because if it's not a real goal of yours, then, you know, we know plenty of people who don't accomplish very much because they're just sitting back expecting things to happen.
I love the title. How bad do you want it? And it makes sense as you explain how you came to it. So you said you coach. Where did you coach collegiately and where did you coach in high school?
I coached at Chipola College, and I've also coached at Wren Lake College. I've also high school, Vashon, and Mascoutah High School. Chipola was in Florida. Wren Lake is Southern Illinois. Mascoutah is Southern Illinois, and Vashon is in Missouri, the St. Louis area. So yeah.
What part of the country do you consider home? I know you said you're an Army brat, but where's home for you?
St. Louis area for the most
Okay.
part. Yeah, for the most part. I don't know how long that'll be. Maybe the next 2-3 years, perhaps. My family, and that's part of my story too. From living overseas, my family, right before I hit high school, my dad wanted to make sure that we got stationed in the States, and this was the area which we got stationed. But they are getting ready to move to California, which is where I was born and where my mom is from. So we'll see.
You'll see. Rebecca, so you said maybe you don't want to give yourself a time limit about how much longer you play, but have you thought about what life looks like for you after you officially retire from playing?
Let's see. What will life look like after me? After I'm done playing. I mean, honestly, for me, I live a life of just trying to be everything that I wish I had growing up. So it's part of what I already do. I do speaking engagements. I reach out to young student athletes to kind of show them the way. You know, I'm an advocate for female athletes, women's basketball. And so I plan to stay around that and use my platform and all the tools that I've, grown to have over this time to kind of build, I want to say, like my own empire that continues to give back. Right now I'm working on a few things that adds to the resources that I can help hand out. Working on building a marketing team for NIL stuff to help out young student athletes. I actually had a meeting about that last week and a couple of other things. But yeah, I'm entering new spaces, and I've got a creative mind where I want other athletes like myself to know that you are more than an athlete. You are a walking brand. You are capable of doing all the things and accomplishing all your hopes and dreams, and that's what it's all about.
Talking with Rebecca Harris, and I've got to get to the way that we even became connected. You put something on Twitter, and you said, you know what? I should create a thread about the time that I was playing in mid-season. I was flown, was it from Poland from Poland to Ukraine? Share that story. And so then AJ's like, oh, it should be in a book. And you said, you know what? I'm working on that. I'm like, well, let's talk about it. Share that story with us, because that was fascinating to me.
This story kind of runs deep, but yes, I was playing on a team in Poland, and one of my teammates actually was Ukrainian there, and she had played on the Ukrainian national team before, and this is when 3-on-3 was just kind of getting going. It's bigger over in Europe than it is here in the States, but there was a break in our season in Poland, and she asked me, along with her husband, who was our assistant coach, was like, hey, what do you think about possibly being on our 3-on-3 national team? And we have an Olympic trial coming up. It's a tournament where we'll win money if we place first. That kind of bumps us up, and we'll look into you getting citizenship. So as someone who plays professionally overseas, anytime somebody wants to talk about you getting citizenship and another passport, that is always a light bulb. Why? Because that usually equals a lot more money down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Because when teams look for Americans to be a part of their team, how do I explain this? Different countries allow a certain amount of Americans on your team. But if you have a European passport, you don't count as an American. So
Got you.
so they're able to get you and they're willing to pay you because that's just extra. Yes, we get you and you don't count as an American, but we know you are. So so I was like, okay, let's check it out. Let's go. And we flew to Ukraine for about 3 days. And Ukraine is the poorest country that I've been to in a while. That's for sure. And it was third world. I tell you, I was sleeping in everything I owned. One, it was cold, but I'm like, okay, I don't want to touch anything. It was crazy, the area we were in. But we went, and I got to know the 3-on-3 game, which is very different. It is very fast paced. You think you're in shape, you're not. It's very fast paced. Remember, I was in the middle of my season, so I know I was in shape. But 3-on-3 is a different shape.
Right.
And it's much more physical too. And we came up short by I think 1 or 2 points to win first place. We ended up winning second. We got paid. It wasn't a grand amount of money because Ukraine pays the least amount of everything. Their money is so low, cheap economy, all of that. But it was a great experience. And at the end of it, we're still talking about a few different things, some options. Hey, we really loved the way that you played. It was good. Do you think you want to be part of our national team? And we're talking, and they're like, the best way to make it happen is we can get married. I know somebody who will just make sure that it's a business transaction. We'll make sure that the contract says, like, they can't get any of your assets if you divorce or things like that. And I'm like, what? I really have to marry someone? Because there are different ways to go about it, but that would have been the quickest one. And they really tried to sell me on that, and I was like, no, I can't do that. The people that were involved with that, I didn't trust them enough for that piece. But I actually, over the last 2 years, had still been having some conversations about what it would be like to get a passport. There's been talks of actually speaking to the president of Ukraine, but obviously they are very busy right now. There's a lot of things going on.
Right.
So that conversation is, one, on hold, and two, I don't know if it'll ever happen. I'm not too concerned with it right now because there are much bigger things going on in the world. But, it almost happened. It almost happened.
I tell you, that's fascinating. So you have, you said you actually spent time in Ukraine. So when you saw, as you followed just a few months and seen the war, what has been your thought, since you have actually some personal experience with being in the country of Ukraine and Ukrainian people?
So the story I just told was from about 4 years ago, but just a year and a half ago, I was in Ukraine for about 4 or 5 months. Won a third place medal there. So I've been actually in contact with a lot of my Ukrainian teammates from then and just checking in on them. Some of them I'm afraid to say, like, I have not heard from them, and I'm worried about them. But the ones that I have heard from, they're no longer in Ukraine. They had to flee. They're asking for ways that I can help. Some of them are trying to flee to our country, and they just need someone to kind of sign off on some things. It's scary. I can't imagine had I been there in this time frame, because I actually could have. I was in talks of negotiating to be there, but I accepted the opportunity to play in Vegas for Athletes Unlimited, and it's just a crazy situation. I've never experienced, being in the middle of a war or anything like that. I have experienced needing to evacuate a country in a hurry for other reasons, and it was just as scary. But, like, people not knowing where their family is, not knowing where they're going to lay their head the next day, not knowing what home is anymore, and trying to figure it out. My heart goes out to them because I just can't imagine. It is quite scary,
Rebecca Harris, I so appreciate you visiting with us today. Hopefully, it will not be the last time. Before I let you go, I have to get your thoughts on the NBA playoffs now that we're in the conference finals. If you have, if the teams you thought would be in the conference finals, are they there now? Are they here now? Who are you picking in the conference finals? And who do you, if you had to say who you pick overall, who would that be?
My team is still playing. I'm a Warriors fan, Steph Curry. You know, I want the Warriors to win it all. I do every year. You know, I think most people like myself predicted that Brooklyn would have done much better. But, you know, that's the way the ball bounces sometimes. We do love a great underdog story. So I'm happy to see some of these teams that have a bunch of young bucks flourishing right now. You know, the Celtics, shout out to Jason Tatum, you know, St. Louis boy right here. You know, if they ended up winning it all, I'd be just happy. You know, shout out to Dallas for making some moves. Luka is crazy. You know, I tried to tell people on this side of the world that Luka was no slouch, because Luka was a young boy making big time waves playing in EuroLeague, which is the top of the top outside of NBA.
Right.
It is. And he was 18, 19, making grown men who had been playing for a long time. Like, he was the MVP of the EuroLeague. People don't necessarily understand how crazy that is. And here in the NBA, it's really kind of easy for him. You know, he's not the quickest person on the floor. He gets to move at his own pace and just do what he wants off of one leg. He's got Dirk in the background feeding him some inside scoop stuff and teaching him his moves. But I'm happy to see all these teams here. I wish the Suns didn't go out the way they did.
Yeah, man. That was my team, only because I just have such respect for Monty Williams and Chris Paul. Chris played a little bit in Houston for a couple of seasons, and I really wanted to see him get a chip. I felt like this might have been the last shot. I don't know. I don't want to count him out. But, man, the way they went out was super disappointing.
Devastating. It was devastating. I didn't expect that. Just like I didn't expect the score between the Bucks and the Celtics either. I'm like, what's up with these game sevens? I expected it to be championship caliber, head to head, like no one's giving an inch. But for both of them to be blowouts was unexpected. You know, to the Suns, I love the Suns organization. I think very highly of Monty. I think very highly of Chris Paul. Devin Booker, he's coming up. I also have a friend on the coaching staff, a U of I alum, Brian Randall. So I hold them to a high standard. I think they can be back. It depends on a couple different things, you know, what they're going to look at over the summer, what pieces they'll add, what pieces might leave. You know, and then we never know what's going on in someone's locker room. There's some other things that may have played a part because they just did not look like the team that we know them to be, you know? Yeah. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to you know, this next round of games, and I'll be glued to my TV.
When will the new book come out, and when should we look for it? And where can we find your current book?
So my current book, How Bad Do You Want It? Please go to my website, Rebecca30harris.com. I've actually got some new stuff popping up soon there with more blogs. I'm going to have 30 days of podcasts dropping next month. And so you'll get lots more content. But you can get this book on my website, Rebecca30harris.com. And then the newest book that will speak more about my own personal experiences playing overseas and more of my life. I'm hoping that'll come out in the next year or so. I'm taking my time with it because there are so many things to add on a regular basis that have to do with my playing career. And and I wanted to really, you know, it's a special project, and I really want to share some inside scoops that most people, you have no idea what happens overseas and the parts that happen within a team and being away, and depending on the position you play, there can be some mental health is real. And I've been a point guard my entire career, except for one season I played a shooting guard. But that's a lot. That comes with a lot. Like, team owners having conversations with you to bring up the rest of your team up to speed, and you just trying to lead your team to win championships or to stay in a league or to hit certain goals. And then, of course, you got to make sure that you're in your best shape and handling your game and auditioning for your next season and next team. So there's just a lot of things that come into play.
Do you know where you'll go, where you're headed next season? Are you already signed, and have you decided which team you'll play for in the fall?
No, I haven't decided yet. Actually, just had a conversation with my agent yesterday. But usually I don't sign until later in the summer, maybe July, August, and that just depends on a lot of other things, the other movement happening around certain leagues overseas and even leagues in the WNBA. Like, there's just so many moving parts and pieces. So.
Well, we wish you success. We will talk to you before, hopefully, when you decide where you're headed next. We look forward to your podcast and your next book dropping. Thank you for joining us today, and you are welcome back anytime.
Thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. For all the listeners, follow me. I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Rebecca30H on Twitter and Instagram. And then if you're big on TikTok, you can find me at Beck Harris 30, BECHARRIS 30 on TikTok.
Cool. Well, I will post it on all the platforms so they can follow you as well. We'll be in touch, and hey, let us know if you need us, and when you got something going on, make sure you come back and share it with us here.
Will do. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot. That is Rebecca T. Harris. You can find her on all of her platforms. I'll post the links to where you can find her book. I've already posted her website. You can also follow her on social media. I encourage you to do that. And as always, thank you all for being a part of Chalk Talk this week. Let me hear from you. If there's somebody that you'd like for me to talk to, if you've seen something, or if there's an interview that you'd like, I'd like to hear from this person, Kim. Drop me a note. You can hit me up on any other social media platforms. You can also email me always, kim@kimydavis.com. That's one place you can reach me. I have put the link of where you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, because my goal is to start moving the show exclusively to YouTube. Right now, we're still on all the social platforms. When I took the break and went to Africa for a couple of weeks, I thought I needed to give more time to make this transition. But make sure that you subscribe, and we're going to have a couple contests coming up with some giveaways. But please do subscribe to YouTube. Again, there is the link is on the screen right now, where you can easily just go and subscribe, and then share that link with your friends and your social media platform. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can help us grow there. And also remember to follow Kimmy Treats, right? Kimmy Treats is the title sponsor of Chalk Talk, and you can get the vegan popcorn. Also, you can get the hand whipped body butter. For now, at some point, I'm going to separate the two, but right now they're all under the same brand, under the same website. But go to Kimmy Treats, get some vegan popcorn, place your order so that you can have it, so you can do the Netflix and chill over the weekend, or so you can watch the games with it. And yes, yes, I am giving away some of those goodies I make. Absolutely. And I have some other goodies that I didn't make, but I think you'll find interesting. But so you got to keep following, stay engaged, become a subscriber on YouTube, and I'll let you know the contest over the next 7 to 10 days. In the meantime, remember, if you are not vaccinated, I encourage you to get vaccinated. Make sure that you are registered to vote. Right now in Texas, there's a runoff for the primary. It's early voting this week. You have until Friday where you can go and vote. And then the actual election day is next Tuesday. So I'm encouraging you, if you are registered, to make sure you vote. If you're not registered, get registered, because all elections matter, and there are going to be big elections coming up this fall. So we need you to exercise your right and to let your voice be heard at the voting poll. Also, practice. Be safe, right? COVID isn't over. And I want to make sure that you're safe and your family's safe. So remember, do something kind for yourself and do something kind for somebody else. I appreciate you being here. Until next time, make it a great, great week. And I'll see you next Tuesday, same time. And if you're watching the replay, I'll see you when I see you. Have a great week, everybody.